See, in our opinion, it is an absolute travesty that 30 years into democracy, we're still talking racial demographics, when the entire objective of liberating the country was so that we are one nation. The colored vote is a very specific demographic. The colored community has been disenfranchised. During apartheid, they were disenfranchised. Colors were treated as second-rate citizens. And during democracy, the 30 years of democracy, colors were also disenfranchised. Because if you look at black economic empowerment, in particular, affirmative action and so on, they tended to favor African blacks over other blacks. Because certainly when it was apartheid, if you were not white, you were classified as falling under apartheid, and you were therefore a victim of apartheid. So it's really sad that at this point in time, 30 years into democracy, we're still having this conversation. However, when you do look at this particular demographic, the colored community is quite a significant vote in the country. In the Western Cape, it's a significant statistic. Yeah. In the Eastern Cape, in the Northern Cape, as well as here in Gauteng, there are significant colored numbers. And it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge the struggles that colored communities face. As recently as last year, we went through a by-election in Ward 7 in Ennerdale. And one of the biggest complaints we were getting from the community was that opportunities, even within the community, at local supermarkets, where coloreds were not being employed. But, Thabo, we should not be having this conversation around coloreds or this, because if you're not... Sorry, thank you. If you look at what has happened over the last 30 years of democracy, it's not just colored people that have been disenfranchised. Yes. It is a very elite group of people that have benefited from black economic empowerment. Right. So there are different racial groups that have been disenfranchised by black economic empowerment. And in coming into this watershed election year, I think it's very important for us to stop and recognize that in the 2019 general election, 18.3 million South Africans did not vote. Yeah. 17.6 million South Africans voted. And of that, only 10 million votes went to the ruling party. Right. Now, 18.3 million versus a victory of 10 million votes is a significant margin. That's a message that's going out to the ruling party, a very clear message of people that are very disillusioned, that are very frustrated with what is going on. And if you look...
I want to come back to that, but let's bring Fatima in here. Fatima, let's talk a little bit about that. Is there a single homogeneous voting bloc or entity that is called the colored vote? And historically, what is that particular vote affiliated with?
I would like to latch on to what my colleague said, but this is what I call the colored vote a fluid vote. Because when you go into parliament or any governmental institution, you will find colored people in all the parties. So we are all over. Yeah. During the apartheid years, or during the struggle, the colored people were part of the struggle. But for some reason, it seems like there's a bit of amnesia when it comes to the current governing party. They forget that the colored people were part and parcel of the struggle. And even some of the other African groups were part and parcel of the struggle, and they are just being sidelined. When you look at the different parties, the new parties that are coming up now, they are very much more interracial. Because personally, myself, would not like to be associated with a party that is only focused on one demographic. Yeah. That is why I joined the United Independent Movement, because they say that we are here for everyone, for South Africans. Yeah. Yes, we do recognize that the only group that is stagnant in terms of economic development, in terms of social development, etc., is the colored people. Yeah. Because yes, in the past they were used and they are still being used. And as I said in the beginning, it's a fluid type of vote. Yeah. People, they go where they see fits them.
Yes.
And I would like to encourage people and say, yes, look at a party and say to yourself, this is a party that speaks to me, not because it is a colored party, not because it represents only a specific group. We need to move away from that now. We need to move away from just being one specific group orientated. We are South Africans. It's because people have been doing that the past few years that the governing party has gotten away with things. And that's basically all I'd like to say.
Do you know, let me bring you in here. For example, a majority of people post-1994's election, were moving into the democratic dispensation, would have interpreted, without maybe much interrogation, the colored vote as a vote associated or having a historical affinity with the National Party. Today, we look at that colored vote, and most people want to associate it maybe with the Democratic Alliance more than they would associate it with the ANC. Is that a correct interpretation?
Good evening, and good evening to the panelists as well as the viewers. I think the reason why you'd want to interpret it like that, if we can recall, in the Western Cape, in our first democratic election, it was the colored vote that gave the National Party the Western Cape. And the reason why that happened was the National Party at that time still managed to put the fear into people that if you do not vote for us, this is what's going to happen to your communities. If the ANC takes over, you are not going to get services and all of that. And we see 30 years down the line, we are being sold a narrative that the Western Cape is such a beautifully run government. But when you really go into those very same colored and black areas, you see that they are actually bearing the brunt of that vote. And yes, the colored vote is extremely important in this country. And I want to take you back to when Patricia de Lille started good. I think it was like 3 months before the elections. This is just to show you how powerful that colored vote is. She had 3 months. She managed to get 2 seats in the National Assembly based on that colored vote by breaking away from the Democratic Alliance. So it shows you that this vote is going to be a swing vote. And it's important now because the colored vote has become, if you look at the colored communities especially, it was people that never really cared about politics. The ones who did voted religiously for the Democratic Alliance because they didn't want the ANC. But now with other political parties coming to the fore and community activists, community workers, conscientizing these people to say, but your vote really is important. I feel that this colored vote in this year's election is going to be a swing vote. I believe that if that missing middle can really become politically active, they can really swing who governs this country come May elections. Yeah. That colored vote is that colored vote is that stone that the builder rejected, which will become the cornerstone after the May elections, and that is my belief.
Yeah, interesting that you bring that up. So, what are the factors that you believe affect this particular vote, except for, I suppose, the current debates, around employment equity and those policies and what has been raised already around Triple B by Angela. What are the other factors that drive that particular vote?
Okay. I'm a local government councillor, and I already see that even during our budget processes, as soon as you start discriminating allocation of budgets to certain communities on the basis that they are not our voting constituency or they are colored people, they are better off than black people, you don't find colored communities as you would have back in apartheid. Our communities are very diverse. The ward that I am in was an historical ANC ward with 5 VDs. We won that ward. I became a ward councillor in this ward. We won 2 of those 5 VDs. The 3 other VDs, they didn't get enough votes. It was the colored vote that actually won this ward. And the reason why they are starting to stand up is because if you don't bring services to the area, if you don't bring development to the area, there's no job creation, one. So it's the issue of job creation. It's the issue of lack of opportunities. It's the issue of the reason why drugs and gangsterism is rife in colored areas is because there's nothing else for them. Government doesn't give them anything else to do. And it almost seems like it's deliberately engineered to make those people a third-class citizens, because that is how colored people are feeling in this country currently.
Yeah. Angela, yeah, okay, you can come in.
Just to latch onto that, it's actually just bread and butter issues. Mm-hmm. Just the plain and simple things that all South Africans actually deserve. Service delivery, a job, food to eat, a roof over their heads. That's the basics. Education and security. That's the basics that all South Africans want.
Yes.
And so also the colored people.
Yes.
So that is why I have an issue with the fact that we have to, fragment and specify the colored vote. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately we have to, because they are the second largest group in South Africa.
Why the fact is because there are now too many parties that are becoming colored parties, so to speak. Yes. That's the correct phrasing to use, right? I don't know what that is.
No, I agree with you.
But then the question becomes, this separateness, does it not then create some kind of inequality also in the electoral system?
It actually does. It actually does. It creates more fragmentations. It creates more little groups, instead of people looking at a party and saying, does this party speak to me? Not, is it a colored party? Are the leaders colored? You see, the indigenous people, let's go there. The indigenous people of South Africa are not all the same. People look at us, we look different. When you go to the different provinces in South Africa, and KZN, that grouping is different. Yeah. They're made up of Zulu and Indian and so on. When you go to the Northern Cape, the makeup there is different. In Gauteng is different. So instead of having an umbrella opinion of that specific group, because some call themselves Khoi, others say I'm not Khoi, I am colored, I am not colored, I am Griqua. So every person that is part of that group, they need to look at a party and say, does the party speak to me? Does the policies, the constitution, does what they stand for speak to me? Will they see to it that I get what I deserve? No special, nothing special. Just everything that all South Africans are longing for.
Angela, you wanted to weigh in on that, you already started. The state's response to the colored community in terms of equal access to resources, for example.
Absolutely, Thabo. If you take this back to the dawn of democracy, coloreds, like I said, under apartheid, were coming out of apartheid as second-class citizens. But the narrative that was sold, you used the example of the Western Cape and how the colored vote basically swung the Western Cape in the favor of the National Party at the time. And that was because of the whole politicking and playing races off against each other, where this narrative was sold that coloreds shouldn't really complain because you're slightly better off than black people. I speak from lived experience, having grown up partially on the Cape Flats in Manenberg, where on a Sunday afternoon after lunch, you'd be standing at your front door and you'd have to rush back inside because the gangs would be passing your house armed with pangas and so on, going to fight each other on the field next to the Roman Catholic Church. Sure. Anybody from the Western Cape will relate to this. The issue of drugs has been a historic issue. However, 30 years into democracy, it's not just a colored dynamic. The issue of drugs, nyaupe and tuk and crystal meth, is something that affects all racial groups. If you look at the issues that affect all races, I mean, if you take COVID didn't care whether you lived in Bryanston and had medical aid or whether you lived in Orange Farm and in a shack. Everybody was equally affected by COVID. Drug abuse, substance abuse affects everybody equally. And it is up to the state to provide an environment that is conducive for all South Africans to be able to change. The fight that needs to be taken against substance abuse is not against the addict, it's against the dealer. We need to be fighting the dealer and assisting the addict. The addict is sick. So we need to be assisting. We need to up our education system. We cannot be dealing with a 30% pass rate because that 30% pass rate affects predominantly black people that cannot, similarly with private medical aid, that cannot afford to send their children to private schools and get them tutors and so on. But if you look at the majority of people, everybody just wants a better opportunity, a better life.
So why then have we abandoned the consensus on that non-racialism?
Who exactly has abandoned that?
Well, we seem to have, because that's why we have emerging of all sorts of parties that say, well, because we have been sidelined and marginalized all this time, so we'll start our own party.
I don't think that we've abandoned the non-racialism. The parties you see emerging are emerging in response to government's failures.
Exactly.
We are living in communities. The rule of law is non-existent in this country. The infrastructures are collapsing all over the place. You've got roads exploding out of the blue. You've got buildings that are catching fire, that are being set on fire. You've got shacks mushrooming all over the place. It's something that affects everybody. The parties that are mushrooming are trying to offer practical solutions to South Africa. If you take a party like ours, Action SA, we've come out of our policy conference in September of this year, and we've put a host of policies in place, including an alternative to black economic empowerment, which is inclusive economic empowerment, and where we are hoping to bring about equity, because different groups have been left behind, some from apartheid days, some beyond apartheid days, and the idea is to level that playing field and ensure that the government creates an environment where businesses thrive and are able to create jobs, that the education system is functioning, that everything that government is supposed to be doing is functioning, and that citizens are able to benefit.
Is on that toasty issue of race politics, but in particular this time.